So Republicans on recess, no health care or tax reform getting done at this point. The big-time GOP donor Bob Hegman says Republicans raised a lot of money on empty promises, so he's disappointed, and that quite, seems natural. But here's what's interesting. He's actually suing, trying to get his money back. Take a listen.
Thank you very much.
So you're suing?
That's correct.
It's kind of a dramatic move.
In the Eastern District of Virginia, we have no choice. I mean, the Republicans are not serious about repealing Obamacare. They are so split. Nothing they've put on the table touches Obamacare.
What's your final message here for GOP leaders right now?
If I win, you're going to have a choice. You're going to have to do what you promised. You're going to have to repeal the Obamacare as it's in the Stimulus Act. You're going to have to provide the alternatives, or you can give back the money, which is as much as $735 million.
Whoa. Let's bring Larry Sabato in, University of Virginia's Center for Politics. He's, of course, the director there. I'm just thinking if this guy has grounds for a lawsuit, then just about every politician would be broke who don't keep campaign promises. But it's kind of an interesting take, right? What do you think?
Yeah, there are a lot of politicians shaking their heads going, you're kidding.
No,
you mean I have to do what I say?
Right.
No, if I were that gentleman, I would not go taking out any additional mortgages or spending the money in any way. I think it's highly unlikely that he will win the suit. But I don't think that's why he filed it necessarily. He filed it to make a point, and his point is valid. Republicans ran 4 elections over 7 years with the fundamental promise that they were going to either repeal Obamacare or repeal and replace Obamacare, and they haven't. The reason he won't win his lawsuit is there was no binding contract.
Right.
I doubt there's a judge in the country who wouldn't say you'd have to be pretty naive to rely on politicians' promises. So he's not going to win the lawsuit, but he'll make a point.
He's filing the lawsuit, and he's already won. He has you and I talking about it to get attention and to bring attention to his point, which does bring up, maybe at least one or maybe more larger points, which is, they haven't got anything done big time. They haven't got health care through. Who knows whether they will get tax reform through. Who's going to get blamed for that? I mean, the knee-jerk answer would be the Republicans in Congress, but obviously the president at some point. I mean, which side is going to get more blame? Is it the legislative or the executive side from what you're picking up?
Oh, I think both will end up being blamed, but of course our assumption there is that they won't get tax reform done, or even, it's unlikely now, but we've all seen Mitch McConnell perform these end of Congress wonders from time to time. I wouldn't rule out the possibility of something coming back on health care. So, we're only, 7 months in, 7.5 months into the new Congress, and we've got 15 months to run in this Congress. So a lot's going to happen. But the gentleman's point is well taken. After all, when you make a fundamental promise and you break it, you pay for it. I'm always reminded of a guy I like a lot, President George H.W. Bush, who got punished pretty severely at the polls for promising at 88, read my lips, no new taxes. And in 1992, of course, he lost because he had broken that promise in the early 90s.
I wonder what the biggest problem was this time. Was it just order, just in your opinion? If they went tax reform first or just even tax cuts first, that they could have got something through, could have got a little bit of momentum, and then, to your earlier point, then come back to health care. But instead of coming back to it, they'd be going to it for the first time during the Trump administration. They're really getting hit for just going in the wrong order, do you think?
Possibly, although it actually is more difficult to do the tax cuts and tax reform if you don't know what the budget looks like, and you can't know what the budget looks like until you decide on Obamacare.
Yep.
So there are reasons why they did it, but as you're saying, it would have been better to start with something else, maybe infrastructure. But even that is constrained by what's in the budget.
Talk during the transition that somehow the president was going to work with Chuck Schumer, and now that seems like, you almost see, if you said that out loud, you think, well, is that out of my mind? I mean, that doesn't look like there's any chance they would work together on anything. But back then, there was serious talk about that. 2 New York guys get together on infrastructure, and now it seems like there's literally no chance of that happening.
Probably not. Again, it's Congress. You never want to say never with Congress. Strange things happen. There's more than Santa Claus going around in the dark of night in the halls of Congress. So you never know what they're really doing until the morning.
No, you're right. I mean, and even this week, the whole Political story. Like yesterday, I think we talked about it right at the top of the show yesterday, that there was all this talk about the president being primaried, possibly even by his own sitting vice president, which obviously was pushed back on hard by the vice president. But just the idea that John Kasich or somebody would run against him, it seems to have this assumption that he's very, very weak, that he's down to the polls, that he's a one-termer. But you do never know, even on something like that, because, you know, right, October of last year, or even after Access Hollywood, or a whole number of times, we would have said he'd never be president, that he was. So even with that, maybe we're ahead of ourselves.
Of course we're ahead of ourselves. It's 2017. The election is in 2020. It doesn't even start until January of 2020. So this is a time for wild speculation, and that's what we're doing. And that's okay, but it's not worth anything.
Not even a lawsuit. That is a pretty funny lawsuit, though, that the guy just every politician would just look at that and be like, boy, campaign promises, you can't make them. Thank you, Larry. It's good to see you, by the way. Thanks for coming on.
Nice to see you. Thanks so much.